if I buy a quality property in a quality neighborhood and my rents are meeting or exceeding all of my expenses, it almost doesn't matter that I see a 3 or 5% or even a 10% dip in property values, because I'm holding on to this property for a long, long time. And I'm very confident if I bought at a market that is growing, even if there is a dip, within 5 or 10 or 20 years, I'm very confident that property is going to be worth way more than I purchased it for. And the better my tenants are, the easier it is for me to keep it for those boring 10 years of hopefully very little day-to-day maintenance.
Welcome to this edition of Retire Well, Retire Happy with your host, Annie Nelson. An Australian look at reinventing yourself for retirement and getting yourself retirement ready. It's always fascinating getting to know what people are getting up to in retirement, how they are supplementing their incomes, pensions, where they have chosen to live, how they are filling their time, what charities they are supporting, and what adventures they are having. And we'll also talk to experts in their fields, including investing, health, estate planning, financial advisors, and seniors healthcare.
Hi, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Annie Nelson. And today on Retire Well, Retire Happy, we have Michael Dominguez. And Michael is an award-winning sales representative, a member of the RE/MAX Hall of Fame, and the founder of Doors to Wealth Real Estate Group, a team of realtors focused on educating and assisting people in residential real estate. After becoming a realtor in 2008, Michael realized the opportunities in real estate investing and bought his first investment property, proceeding to add to his portfolio for 10 consecutive years. Throughout his realtor career, he has completed over 300 investment property transactions, and Michael is now an author of the book all about real estate. It's called The Armchair Real Estate Millionaire. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much, Anna. I very much appreciate it.
So whereabouts are you located, Michael?
Yeah, I'm located just east of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, I've been living in Canada my whole life. So that's where I am from.
And I believe you've been on a visit to Australia. So you know how vast this country is.
I have. And yeah, a lot of similarities I found between Australia and Canada, both from a economic standpoint. There were a lot of similarities. Your weather's a lot nicer than ours. But again, there were a lot of similarities. And I very much enjoyed my time in Australia and hoping to go again when we finally get this lockdown done.
Yes, we're still in COVID. And I know if I left the country, they probably wouldn't let me back in unless I had a really, really good reason to go away. We're not allowed to travel just for the fun of it anymore. We do have a travel bubble established with New Zealand, so that's one country we're allowed to go to, and that's about it. So there's a boom. Actually, you need to buy shares in the caravan manufacturing companies because there's a boom in caravan sales here in Australia.
Yeah, I actually own some Winnebago shares as well, actually, very similar.
Okay. What inspired you to dip your toes and get into the real estate market? I see you were a realtor first before you actually became an investor.
Exactly. And prior to that, I've always been in various types of sales. Prior to that, I used to sell franchises and with a pet food franchise. And I found that I just gravitated to the people that were trying to get ahead. They were, self-employed business people, entrepreneurs, and investors. And so obviously as a sales representative, I was helping them buy their franchise. And then when I came into real estate, I just gravitated right away to the investors. And after helping 5, 10, 15 people, I thought, I should be doing this too. And that's kind of where I got going. So, yeah.
It's obviously working for you. So this is going to be your retirement plan. I believe you're going to be happily retired with your real estate portfolio, providing you with that check every month.
It's one of these things that And, obviously in my book, I talk about it in much more detail. But I started out like everyone else. What I was taught was, some of what I call the myths of real estate investing is you only make money on the buy, and you have to buy these undervalued properties in secondary neighborhoods and trying your best to get this great deal. And, you got to take advantage of some granny and buy this property at great discounts. And I did that. I bought a few properties early on that were real secondary properties. And I struggled because I was dealing with inferior tenant profile. Even if I renovated my place as best I can, all the houses around my properties were kind of crappy as well. I just couldn't keep the good tenants. And it was almost like an aha moment when it struck me as if I buy a property, if I think ahead of time to find a property that my ideal tenant would be most interested in the neighborhood they want to live in, close to their employment, close to shopping. If I find a property that meets all of those criteria, I can get a quality property in that quality neighborhood, attract quality tenants, and then hold on to them for years and years and years with very little ongoing work. And, yeah, it's a part-time job. It's going to take a few hours a month, but it's really pretty simple. And what it's essentially done for me and a lot of my friends is, instead of thinking about retiring at 65, I'm now just turned 55 this last year. And yeah, I'm in a financial position to retire. And if it hadn't been for my real estate acquisitions, that just simply would never have happened.
It's amazing to hear a completely different viewpoint on what you need to retire and how you can get there. I actually have a son who has become an accidental real estate owner through working for a federal government department and being transferred around the country. He now has 3 houses in 3 different states. So, and he's decided that he's going to keep them all, and he should have had them all paid off by the time he retires, and he's going to be very happy.
100%. And actually, I talk about this in my book. If as little as 2 or 3 properties in a market like Australia as long as they're in a market where you're seeing proper GDP growth, proper employment growth, housing, population growth, there is no reason to think that you're not going to attract a great tenant. And those 3 properties in 10 years will turn you into a real estate millionaire. And, that's pretty cool. That's really cool, actually. Now, the one thing I would do differently than your son is I'm way too lazy to learn the strengths of 3 different states. I would rather, you don't necessarily need to be an expert all over the country. Finding a market that works for you, and as long as it meets a lot of the demographics and you can build a power team, you can own in one town, all within 5 minutes of each other, and that's enough to make your portfolio prosper.
Right. In your book, you talk about the millionaire side hustle to fuel your financial freedom in 10 years with your investing framework. Would you like to explain that a bit more?
Absolutely. And, actually, in the book, I have, I'm not the A+ student in the world. I don't read a wealth book every other day. I'd like to think that my book was more conversational. I include a lot of really cool stories. And one of my favorite things I do is I include some success stories. And I have some of the clients that have, like I said, as little as 2 or 3 properties and the difference that it's made in their life. And so I'll take, for an example, a young guy. He was 25 when he first met me, and he had enough money to scrape together to buy his first place. And then now in Ontario, in Canada, we have basements. And so that's how we were able to duplex the property. Obviously, in Australia, there's not nearly the same number of basements, but you can build granny flats or what were you talking about, Anne? The
high-set homes, yeah.
The high-set homes. And but anyway, they were able to get a secondary suite. But by having the 2 quality tenants and with legal severance approved by the city, or not severance as far as 2 addresses, but certainly divided up, these properties generated enough rental income for this gentleman to that it covered all of his expenses. Then he got enough money, he refinanced it because it had gone up in value, plus all the work he'd done, took the money, did a second one, and actually within 3 years, he actually did three. And so then it's just, he actually is living in one unit and renting out the other five, and he's living his best life. And with appreciation and some mortgage pay down and some cash flow, he's 28, 29 years old right now, and he's got a net worth of over $1 million. When he started, he was 20. He had about $30,000 to $40,000 in cash, and he's turned that into $1 million in 5-6 years.
That must give you such a great sense of satisfaction.
Well, it does, and and here's the thing that that your listeners probably, you hear from all of these investor gurus is they talk about, you need to get 20, 50, 100, 1 million properties and turn it into a full-time career. And honestly, when I listen to that, first of all, it makes me tired, but it's also a little overwhelming. And, this is a type of a business where you could, a part-time job that basically, and I'm talking about 3 to 5 hours a month in efforts, could knock 10 years off your work life and makes you into a multimillionaire. And that's the kind of situation. Could you grow it and turn it into a full-time job? Of course you can. But, it's possible that you can work your 9 to 5, 40-hour week job, spend a couple extra hours a month, and make a real difference in your life.
It's wonderful to hear you talk like that, make a real difference in your life. So being a landlord, there is some work involved. So how do you find the right tenants? So are you doing it yourself, or are you giving it to a professional company to do?
The answer is yes and yes. We do have a few of our properties with property managers, but the vast majority of them we do ourselves. And the reason why we're able to do that is, again, I don't want to brush over the fact that it all started with the quality property. And so we've got tenants that are interested in our place that have credit scores in the 700s. They have like I mentioned to you before the episode started that I've got tenants that are professionals, like lawyers, and I don't have a doctor, but I've got business people that are making $80,000, $100,000 or more. Much like the Australian market in Canada, it's just because you get a 27-year-old becomes a lawyer, that doesn't mean they immediately can afford a house. There's a down payment component. They have to get their life in order. So they've got to rent somewhere. Those are the kind of people I want to attract. And, do things happen? Of course they do. In my book, I talk about, the part-time job and all of the week-to-week or month-to-month activities that can and do come up. We maintain it. We don't allow any deferred maintenance in our properties. But honestly, if by treating our tenants with the best respect, we've had nothing but good experiences with our tenants since we went with this investment style. And even during COVID, many of my colleagues who bought those crappy properties in crappy neighborhoods, they were very frustrated with their experience during COVID, where a lot of tenants were not able to or willing to pay rents. They might have damaged their properties. It was impossible to get out a tenant during the lockdown period, much like around the world. And they were very much struggling. Whereas for us, we never had 1 month where a tenant didn't pay the rents. And because we're in the suburbs of a big city, much like the outskirts of Melbourne or Brisbane or Sydney, those areas did very, very well in the last couple of years. And so in actual fact, our vacancy rates went down and our rental numbers went up. So if a tenant did move, we in some cases raised the rents by 10, 20% to the next tenant. And we happily got another great tenant. So is there an issue? Sure. But it's not, everyone always is afraid of those midnight phone calls, those tenant complaints and, the calling the cops. Honestly, if you get people that are just, that treat you with respect, you treat them with respect, and you do all your homework ahead of time and determine their credit score, verify their income. And my wife is a former HR manager, and she's got the most incredible spidey senses in the world. where I say, oh, let's give them a chance. She says, no. So that's how it's worked for us. And it's worked well.
Mm. Well, that's very encouraging that it is possible to do it yourself if you can do those checks. I know it would save a bit of money because I think we're here in Australia, they charge you like a week's rent letting fee, and then they charge you an advertising fee, and then they charge you management fees when you do use a professional agency to manage your properties.
And if you truly want to be an armchair real estate millionaire, having a property management company as part of your power team makes all the sense in the world. But if I can offer you any advice, if you are thinking of hiring a professional, is just because they claim that they're a property manager, I would dive down a little deeper and see if they currently own properties of their own. If they're not property owners, what has the experience been? Who are they selecting for their tenant profile? In some cases, they get that one week's rent for every time they get a new tenant in. So it's almost in their best interest to get a secondary tenant that's only going to be there for a year or so. I'd rather find someone that's dynamite, going to want to live there for 2 or 3 years. And so just manage the property manager, because you are, at the end of the day, you are the CEO of your business.
Right. Thank you. How do you spot a good housing market? So to work out where you're going to invest.
Great question. Honestly, that's, in my mind, is one of the most important questions you can determine. I'm a big believer in looking at the market fundamentals. And it's funny, in the stock market, we're always focused on, say, oh, do we have any inside information, insider trading? And now, obviously nothing necessarily too illegal, because we don't want to wind up in a black and white jumpsuit, but in the stock market, but everyone's looking for that tip. Well, here's how you can get those tips in the real estate market is you could study and do more homework than anyone else. And I look for markets that have a growing GDP. And for those that don't know, gross domestic product, it's basically the sum of everything that's being made in a particular region. So let's say we're taking Melbourne as an example. The GDP of Melbourne is X. Well, that's interesting, but what's really interesting is, what did it happen the year after that or the month after that? Is it a growing GDP or is it a declining GDP? I want a growing GDP, because that's going to lead to them hiring more people. And when they hire more people, there's a population growth. And when there's a population growth, there's more people that are going to look for a place to live, and they're going to need to rent. And after a year or so of them living there, they're going to say, I like this city, I'm going to buy. And then, so what we find is the rental prices start to surge, the housing prices start to surge. And if you can, it almost doesn't matter what happened 3 years ago and 10 years ago in that city, but what's happening now and what's the projection of happening in the next couple of years play all the difference in the world to determine how that market is going to play out. It's a little bit of work. It really is. But if you do that work, you could find the market for you. And, I've done a little bit of research, and I love some of the suburbs around Melbourne, for example. They've had some incredible population growths and some beautiful areas. I don't know Sydney's areas quite as well, but like that's the kind of stuff that I would do very well in. And as long as that property, if you can duplex it, and that's the other thing too, is a property where you can get that granny flat and you can get that secondary suite and you can have 2 tenants, and it does justify the rental income exceeds what the monthly expenses are. How can you go wrong if you've got a cash flow positive property in a great growing area?
Yeah. We were chatting before the interview because we haven't got a glass crystal ball, and we don't know when the whole property market's going to jump in value. And we've been through many downturns like the global financial crisis. However, at the moment, in the areas away from the major capital city, the real estate market is exploding because people are leaving the big cities and
leaving the cities. Yes, right.
And looking for other places to go and live because they can work from home, and then they can see the health benefits of not living close to everyone else.
For sure. So small cities, small towns, and the suburbs of big cities. If people want to stay close to the bigger cities, those areas have thrived during COVID, and all over the world that's happened. So although currently Melbourne's vacancy rate is one of the highest it's been in a long, long time, I don't care. And all I care about is how my town is doing. And you're absolutely right. There will be blips in the market. It's funny how, like, the cryptocurrency market, for example, sees a 25% decline in value, and it hardly makes front page story. If the housing market drops by 3 to 5%, it's, the sky is falling. If I buy a quality property in a quality neighborhood and my rents are meeting or exceeding all of my expenses, it almost doesn't matter that I see a 3 or 5% or even a 10% dip in property values, because I'm holding on to this property for a long, long time. And I'm very confident if I bought at a market that is growing, even if there is a dip, within 5 or 10 or 20 years, I'm very confident that property is going to be worth way more than I purchased it for. And the better my tenants are, the easier it is for me to keep it for those boring 10 years of hopefully very little day-to-day maintenance.
Yes, and the cities are also suffering from the lack of international students because of COVID and the travel restrictions, and that is lending itself to the higher vacancy rates too in those couple of big capital cities, because we do get a lot of international students, and you probably do over there too.
Absolutely, we do. But I could tell you that I don't rent to students. I'm not focused on a student. There's a university that's close to my hometown that I'm investing in, but I'm not wanting to invest or rent to students. I'm renting to that young couple that's 26 to 35 years of age. They're maybe even a little younger sometimes. They've both got jobs. They've got futures. They've got a good credit score. And that's the kind of tenant that I'm focused on. I realize that by renting to students, you can rent by the room and it's potentially more lucrative, but it's a heck of a lot more work. And the whole idea of being an armchair millionaire realtor or real estate investor is that you don't want to be doing all that work. You want to just basically every first of the month. Well, and we're more monthly rents versus weekly, but when that rent, you're confident the rent's coming in and you're confident your expenses are covered, and that's a pretty good position to be in. So
yes, so in the end, we want that check coming in, no matter where it comes from, so we can start taking it a bit easier in retirement. So before we finish up, we're just trying to see what else we can cover. Can you give your best tips? Would you say the property market's hot at the moment, or can you still make a profit?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to share, and I don't know how many of your listeners are younger and are kind of getting, with the housing market having surged as much as it did, there are people that they're doing everything right. They're working in their job, they're making money, they're putting a few dollars away, but they just can't enter into the housing market because the values have increased at such a rapid rate. Now, your son was able to buy something, but a lot of kids are not able to do that. And so there's a term that's been called house hacking, and I didn't come up with a term, but it's been something that's been talked about. It's been done for hundreds of years. But if let's say you're currently in a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, what if you were to buy that property, create the granny flat, that's another 1 bedroom unit, live in the 1 bedroom unit if you have to for a few years, and rent out the other part of the house? That could allow you to enter into the housing market and start building some equity through real estate. And that would be one of the things that I so strongly recommend, is living in one unit, renting out another, and just letting time take its course. No, it's not your dream house. I get that. But you know what? If it gets you ahead, and then in 2 or 4 years, you might be in a position to now buy your dream house, keep the rental, now rent out both units. And now you've got income coming in, plus you've got your principal residence that you're loving as well. That would be my one tip I would tell people to get going on. And if you are listening and you've got kids who are maybe in that situation, I would bet you, and I could be wrong, but the vast majority of us here in Canada and Australia, at least 50% and possibly even significantly more than of your net wealth has come from your own principal residence over the years. using leveraging and such like that, I would advise you to at least consider getting into a situation where you maybe get a loan against your current home, a home equity line of credit, and use that to perhaps joint venture partner with your son or daughter and get them into a position where they can start to move ahead. They take care of the property. And for you, it's not like the day where you're taking your kid to soccer lessons or dance recitals and spending thousands of dollars that you're never going to get back. This potentially could be an investment that could actually help you in your retirement years yourself. And it's helping out your kid get into the housing market, which is never an easy thing to do today.
In your experience, are people coming into the real estate market at an older age? Is it sort of never too late to start being a property investor? What would you say
Absolutely.
to someone in their early 50s soon?
Actually, I'm even going to tell you, one of my clients was in his mid 60s, and his motivation was very different than for the 25-year-old or 30-year-old who's getting into investing. His idea was is he was looking for a little bit of cash flow, but as much as anything, he was looking to have a legacy to pass on to the next generation. And unfortunately, he just passed away last year, but he left behind, he was a contractor, so he did a lot of the work himself. He left behind a portfolio of over $1 million for his family. And he didn't buy his first place till he was in his mid 60s. It absolutely is not too late, but I can't strongly enough recommend to do your homework and find a market that's growing. You don't need to find that discounted 100-year-old property that's decrepit and falling apart and you're in a neighborhood that you wouldn't want to walk at night. No. Invest in a quality market and a quality property, and you attract quality tenants. And it changes your life.
Well, thanks very much for being on the Retire Well, Retire Happy show and sharing your experience in being a real estate agent and a real estate investor. And it sounds like this is going to be a good read for nearly any age. Are you recommending your book?
Absolutely. I'm going to do just a little promo here. Armchair Real Estate Millionaire, and you can get it on Amazon, for example. And I'd like to think it's a fun read because I don't take life too seriously. And my bullet points are palm trees because that's just more fun. And it's got a lot of nice stories. It's some good tips. It's a different strategy that almost anybody can certainly do. You're not dealing with those crappy tenants and crappy toilets. No. And if you are interested in reaching out